Hello and welcome to another episode of Foreign Pulse. Lenin once said there are decades when nothing happens and weeks when decades happen. We are passing through a very momentous phase in Asia where there is a flurry of diplomatic summits and meetings and powwows among major leaders, and it's all coming together at one time in this year 2018. Especially the last couple of weeks have been very proactive in terms of these meetings and summits. So this week we are doing almost like an Asia special, focusing on three major topics. One is the InterKorean Summit between North and South Korea that just happened. The second is the ChinaIndia Summit that happened simultaneously to the Korean Summit. And the last but not least is the tug of war between China and Taiwan over diplomatic recognition, a war that China is winning hands down and Taiwan is on the losing side. So we're going to be looking at the geopolitical implications of these three major stories today. And to bring you cutting edge analysis of this, I have with me pleasure my colleague Professor Hanako Umezawa from Japan. She is going to be my guest today, and she will be analyzing these topics in depth. So let's kickstart today's show. North and South Korea meeting after 11 years once again, and generating a huge amount of expectations about turning the tide in the rhetoric of war and threats and possibility of armed conflict, and taking it away in a different direction, raising hopes of peace. Let's listen into this report about the InterKorean Summit and then take the discussion forward.
Last week, the leaders of North Korea and South Korea held a historic summit meeting at the border between the two countries. This was the first Inter-Korean Summit since 2007. It happened amidst rapid diplomacy involving the USA, the two Koreas, China and Japan. The North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un has sounded highly conciliatory and peaceful in the last few months and has suddenly transformed the previously hostile environment. Is Kim deceiving President Moon Jae-in and President Donald Trump for tactical reasons? Can the current thaw in relations be made permanent? Is denuclearization really achievable?
Is denuclearization really achievable? That's a question we are asking. A host of other questions. Is peace achievable? The leaders have been talking about finally signing a peace agreement to end the 1950-53 Korean War. There is a series of confidence building measures they have suddenly announced. But the biggest question remains, what is going on in Kim Jong-un's mind? He has been projected as a madman, as a rocket man by President Donald Trump, as someone who is trigger happy and who's a very vile and vicious dictator with his own people. And now suddenly they're projecting him as a statesman who is willing to go out, shake hands with his adversaries, bury the past and declare a new era. Is this really possible, or is this too good to be true? Hanako, it doesn't look like there is a fundamental change in Kim Jong-un's approach. It seems like a cosmetic or a tactical ploy that he's adopting. Most people who are skeptical of this process will say, we've seen this before, and it happened in 1994, in the 2000s. The North Korean leaders promise something and then they get some concessions and then they drag it out for a long time, and finally it's back to square one. So what do you think? Are we on the cusp of a major historic shift, or is this simply posturing that we are seeing from Rocket Man?
Well, thank you, Shirin, for having me here. First of all, I'm from Japan and I have a bit of diplomatic experience in some of the European countries. So my analysis is going to be from Japanese point of view. That is something I should say before starting. And when it comes to the nuclearization, we have to realize that no countries do not need too many nuclear weapons, as a matter of fact, and especially the smaller countries, they just need to have just about enough numbers of nuclear weapons so that they can use it as the sort of the tool for diplomacy. So as far as I can see, the recent development is more to do with the fact that Kim Jong-un felt that his country has reached to the certain level of nuclearization. Therefore, it's not even necessary for them to carry on any longer. And I'm very sure that that is the explanation Kim Jong-un is providing to his own people.
So Hanako, in other words, what we are saying is that he wants to keep the existing stockpile of atomic weapons, estimated to be anywhere between 20 to 60 nuclear warheads, and his existing arsenal of medium and long range missiles. He may agree to no testing. He has already promised no testing, but he is not going to give up what he has already achieved. In fact, Kim Jong-un is on record saying we no longer need to test. In other words, he has reached a certain level of deterrence vis-a-vis the United States and vis-a-vis all the other players in the region, and therefore now he can say, put on this mask of being a highly magnanimous and a peace-loving person. But the question really is, how is the region going to react to this? Because there have been so many summits, Hanako. Kim Jong-un met with the Chinese leader. Then the Japanese Prime Minister is hosting a trilateral summit with the Chinese and the South Korean leaders. And then, of course, the ultimate thing which is coming up, which is Trump and Kim one-on-one, likely to happen in the next few weeks. So, is it realistic to expect that all of these will at least, if not denuclearize, at least reduce the tensions, and maybe it's good enough, maybe it's too good to be true, but at least it's good enough to prevent actual war from breaking out, and maybe that is good. I mean, the South Korean president's aides have said that President Moon Jae-in believes that Donald Trump deserves the Nobel Peace Prize for creating the atmosphere in which all this is happening, and Trump wants to declare victory and go home saying, I ended the problem. But it looks like the problem will not end so easily. It's a very complex and long-lasting issue that may drag out for several years to come.
Well, as far as North Korean leaders comment about Trump being good enough to receive a Nobel Peace Prize, is more to do with the fact that he wanted to emphasize that the two Korean leaders, want peace itself, and we can leave the Peace Prize to the Mr. Trump, or something like that. I guess that was more sort of context he was trying to put. As far as I am informed from the earlier news reporting, and consequence of this meeting, various meetings in the region, it's rather difficult to say, because from the viewpoint of Japan, nuclear issue is just one of those problems the government has been dealing with when it comes to the North Korea-Japan bilateral relationship. And there are three issues Japan is concerned, and abduction issues, and the missile issue, and the nuclear issue. And these three have to be sort of dealt with in a comprehensive manner.
And for Trump, Hanako, it doesn't look like he shares the same view. I think he just wants some cap on the nuclear weapons, and he will want to show it as a political success. This is the real issue when it comes to these high-level summits. On one hand, there is the substantive progress that people are watching, whether it happens or not. On the other hand, the leaders want to come out as having been successful and having won. And I think that's the real gap between these two. We'll have to see how far this goes. Let's move on now to another story, which is of course very close to our heart here in India, which is the other summit that happened in Wuhan between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Xi Jinping, which has huge consequences for stability and security in Asia. Let's listen into this report first.
Last week, Prime Minister Narendra Modi held a crucial summit meeting with President Xi Jinping in Wuhan, China. Differences and disagreements were candidly discussed. They also talked about the global situation and major country relationships, a clear reference to India's closeness to the US. Modi and Xi agreed at Wuhan on launching joint economic project in Afghanistan, raising concerns in Pakistan. Is the China-India +1 policy coordination idea feasible? Should India trust China when it is obstructing India's rights? Why would China make deals with India when it feels it has the upper hand in power and prestige?
Well, if the inter-Korean dynamics is a mystery and people are still trying to fathom what is going on in the minds of these leaders and the strategic establishments, there's been equally a bit of a puzzle as to how this summit between India and China suddenly came up without a lot of advance notification. Of course, there was a planning going on behind the scenes, but definitely it was a surprise to many watchers because we hadn't expected it to happen at the time it did. So the questions we are asking is this going to change and create a new paradigm, as the two sides have been saying? They have mentioned greater coordination between each other's militaries to reduce the tensions on the border, to prevent incidents like the Doklam crisis of last year. They have also spoken about this China-India +1, the idea of cooperating together, because China wanted India desperately to join the One Belt One Road, and we have stuck to our guns and refused to do that, and Prime Minister Modi did not make a concession on that point. So therefore they are now trying a workaround by saying, okay, you will not join the big global connectivity project undertaken by China under One Belt One Road, but at least we can work together in countries like Afghanistan and do joint economic projects. They're also saying that they are working towards greater policy coordination, which is an interesting phrase because it means that there is some degree of strategic understanding. The Chinese president is saying that we must think about the global situation, and I think he's referring to the economic war that US President Donald Trump has unleashed on China and the pressure that China is feeling as a result of that. So India suddenly seems to be more valuable for the Chinese right now because of this Trump factor, as I have argued in one of my opinion articles in Foreign Policy recently. But overall, Hanako, if China and India reduce their differences to some extent, clearly it's a good news for the region, because the way the tensions had been building up over the last 1 or 2 years, it seemed like we were actually in a kind of an Asian Cold War, where we don't have direct clashes. But any country you look at in Southeast Asia or in South Asia, we are looking at a kind of a tug of war between the Chinese and the Indians for influence. But do you think we could somehow tamp that down? And if so, why? I mean, why would the Chinese want to do it when they seem to have the upper hand and they are stronger? Is it only because of the US pressure, or you think the Chinese are looking at the broader picture and maybe trying to be a little more accommodative? Because in recent years, the accusation has been, and I think deservedly so, is that China has become far more assertive in its territorial claims and in using its military. And I think that's the real problem, because India is feeling under a siege, and that's the reason for this tension that's going on. So what can we expect? You think we can go in a different direction, or you think this is again like the InterKorean Summit, maybe a victory too soon to be declared, and it actually depends on what happens later?
Well, as you rightly pointed out, it seems to me that the underlying motivation of Xi Jinping to have a summit meeting, informal summit meeting with Mr. Modi, was to do with the fact that China has becoming closer to the United States as well as to Japan. And in that context, of course, it was necessary for Xi Jinping. India was becoming a closer ally for both of these two countries, and within that context, it was necessary for the both leaders to build up some sort of ties. And from the viewpoint of Japan, of course, it's not a bad news. It's a good news, of course. It's better to have a good relationship among the two giants in the region rather than unstable relation between these two countries.
But Hanako, we also have the Quad, with the India, Japan, Australia, United States. You think the Chinese are actually attempting to try and dilute the Quad by doing one-on-one with individual countries, trying to weaken the kind of counterbalancing coalition that could really stop China's rise?
Well, China has always preferred to take the matter in a sort of bilateral stage rather than multilateral stage, and it's quite obvious. For instance, when it comes to the South China Sea crisis, China has been trying to have negotiation with each single ASEAN member state rather than ASEAN collectively.
Yeah.
So
let's see how far this goes, Hanako. Let's watch this, because this is going to be pivotal, because these are two big giants of Asia, and we will hope that they will de-escalate rather than go in the opposite direction. Okay, last but not least, China has also been flexing its muscle against Taiwan, and let's hear this story and pick up the discussion.
On May 1st, the Dominican Republic de-recognized Taiwan and established diplomatic ties with China, leaving only 19 countries in the world which recognize Taiwan. Apart from diplomatic isolation, China is also applying military pressure on Taiwan by conducting massive live-fire drills and war games near the coast of Taiwan and circling Chinese fighter jets around Taiwan. Beijing claims that it is doing so to protect the well-being of the Taiwan people. Is China upping the ante on Taiwan because of American provocations? Why is Xi Jinping becoming more aggressive in using his military? Is a new era of instability emerging in the East Asia due to Chinese assertiveness?
Chinese assertiveness, we have discussed this with regard to many other theaters, but when it comes to what they call the core interests like Taiwan and Tibet, they have become very, very demanding. And what we are seeing on one hand is bribery, because the Taiwan authorities claim that billions of dollars have actually been passed from China to the Dominican Republic to de-recognize Taiwan. And likewise, China has been buying away a lot of countries from Taiwan to de-recognize it. And with 19 countries alone left to support Taiwan and to formally recognize it, it's clear that China is winning this bidding war, so to say. And the checkbook diplomacy, dollar diplomacy, the renminbi diplomacy China is using is obviously very powerful, and Taiwan is not able to compete. But really the question is the combination of military and diplomatic pressure that they are applying to try and reunify Taiwan and to absorb it. They say, the Chinese say that this is in response to American provocations. And the Trump administration has to some extent increased high-level contacts with the Taiwanese and has also done a new missile package for Taiwan to defend itself against a possible Chinese invasion. So Taiwan does, of course, depend on the US to a great extent for its survival. But how long will this last? Especially in the current administration in Taiwan of President Tsai Ing-wen, the Chinese are very, very angry with them. And it looks like they want to close all the options for Taiwan to breathe. So will Taiwan really survive? I mean, it is a nation in a way, although it's of Chinese origin, but as a nation state, how long can it survive when it has such few supporters? Hanako, marginalization of Taiwan, it should be a matter of worry for us because it's a democratic country and it does not seek territory of others, and it is largely been a benign player in Asia. So if it is being trampled like this, I mean, it's a matter of worry. But as scholars of international studies, we often say that the strong, as Thucydides famously said, the strong do as they can and the weak suffer as they must. And Taiwan's tragedy seems to be fitting that maxim.
Well, when it comes to this expression of the checkbook diplomacy used by the Premier of Taiwan Authority, actually speaking, that has been exactly what the Taiwan government has been doing over the last nearly half a century or something. For instance, if you think about all those small countries, well, relatively smaller countries that managed to establish the diplomatic ties with Taiwan, it was to do with the fact that they were expecting a huge sum of development aid from Taiwan. And it was exactly so, for instance, when the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia recognized Taiwan during the sort of internal conflict sort of state. And immediately after that, China used veto at the United Nations Security Council to deny the extension of the mandate of ongoing UN mission in Macedonia. So it is, from Chinese point of view, domestic problem, but it's obvious that it has got an international context as well.
And what is worrying, Hanako, for us in India, watching this is the kind of military, show of strength that China is doing. Xi Jinping wearing, camouflage and doing massive naval exercises, saying we need a mighty People's Liberation Army Navy to reunify Taiwan and to show that we are now arrived as a major power. Now, if tiny Taiwan is crushed and it does not have any allies left, then it's a matter of serious concern about the hegemony that we talk about in Asia. And you're from Japan, and you may also share some of these worries. So what can be done about this hegemonic position that China has reached, and where small fry like Taiwan are just being trampled?
Well, of course, it's difficult to say at this very moment, and from Japanese point of view, it's not going to be the matter of either or. Both China and Taiwan are very important diplomatic partners, and indeed Japan doesn't have a diplomatic tie with Taiwan, but Japan has a de facto embassy in Taipei.
So does India. Yeah. So does India, Hanako, and that's the right way to go, I think. Informally, the friends of Taiwan must continue to associate with it. If not formal recognition, we have these cultural centers, if not embassies. And Taiwan is valuable. Taiwan is investing in India. Taiwan is a major economic partner, is a technology transfer partner. So indeed, be it Japan or India, we will continue to work with Taiwan within the framework of this one China policy, because on the other hand, we cannot deny the reality of this 800-pound gorilla, which is China, which is unstoppable right now. But let's conclude today's show by simply reflecting on all these three issues: Taiwan, Korea's, and the India-China dispute. All of these show that one thing is for sure: there is power which speaks and which dominates, but on the other hand, there are moral questions about peace and justice, as well as the position of the weak in the existing world order. And we must never forsake the weak for the sake of simply currying favor with those who are powerful, because otherwise there will be no balance left in the world. So thank you, Hanako. Thank you for joining me today on the show. Thank you, viewers. And let's keep thinking and brainstorming about how we can make this world a just, equitable, and balanced place.